In 1957, a retired schoolteacher in rural Indiana could feed herself a proper hot lunch using nothing but a can, a slice of bread, and 5 minutes of standing time. No prep, no fuss, no washing up of 3 pans for one person sitting alone at a kitchen table. Today, supermarkets sell single-serve frozen meals for $6 a pop, packed with sodium and wrapped in plastic that takes longer to open than the food takes to heat. My name is Harold. I am 74 years old, and I want to tell you something that nobody talks about when it comes to people eating alone. It is not that they cannot cook. My mother cooked for a family of 5 for 30 years in Indiana. After my father died, she cooked for herself for another 20. She never stopped. She never skipped lunch. She never peeled back a foil tray and called it a meal. But I did. For 16 years, after Betty died, I skipped lunch more days than I ate it. Not because I could not make one, because making lunch for one person felt pointless. The motivation drains away when there is nobody to feed, nobody to please, nobody to say, "That was good, thank you." These 20 lunches changed that for me. They are not recipes, they are permissions. Permission to feed yourself properly when the world has gone quiet. 5 minutes, one person, no excuses. Subscribe before we start. Let us count down the 20 smartest, simplest vintage American lunches that deserve to come back. Number 20. Canned sardines on crackers. That flat tin sat in every grandma's pantry from Maine to Mississippi. Sardines in tomato sauce, about 15 cents a can in the 1970s, were the ultimate no-cook lunch. Pop the top, fork the fish onto a few saltine crackers, squeeze a drop of hot sauce or lemon if you had it, a crack of black pepper, done. The whole thing took 3 minutes and delivered protein, omega-3 fatty acids, and enough flavour to make a plain kitchen feel like a proper lunch counter. Sardines were soft enough for anyone with dental trouble. The tiny soft bones delivered calcium that doctors now say most people over 70 are desperately short of. My mother ate sardines on crackers every Friday without fail. Not because it was Fish Friday, because she liked them. That is reason enough. Number 19. Chicken bouillon with toast soldiers. When the weather turned bitter and the farmhouse felt too big for one person, a mug of chicken bouillon brought warmth back in under 4 minutes. A cube of chicken bouillon dissolved in a mug of boiling water created a rich, salty, warming broth. Meanwhile, a slice of toast cut into strips for dipping turned the drink into a meal. The combination was savoury, warming, and required nothing more than a kettle, a toaster, and a spoon. A box of bouillon cubes cost about 30 cents in the 1960s and lasted months. For pensioners living on a fixed income, this was comfort they could afford. The ritual mattered too. Boiling the water, stirring in the cube, cutting the toast with care. It gave shape to a lunchtime that might otherwise have been skipped entirely. I make this now on cold mornings when I do not feel like cooking. It is better than I remembered. Number 18. Cheese and pickle sandwich. No cooking, no heat, just 2 thick slices of white bread, a wedge of sharp cheddar, and a generous smear of bread and butter pickles or sweet relish. This was the lunch that needed nothing but a cutting board and a butter knife. The tangy sweetness of the pickle was the perfect match for sharp cheddar. A block of cheddar cost about 30 cents in the 1960s and lasted the week. The bread was cut thick because thin bread was for people who had someone else to impress. People eating alone cut their bread the way they liked it. This lunch could be eaten standing at the counter, sitting in the armchair, or on the porch if the weather cooperated. The beauty of a cheese and pickle sandwich was its honesty. It asked nothing of you. No timer, no temperature, no skill beyond spreading. Number 17. Canned tomato soup with toast. Campbell's tomato soup, heated in a small saucepan, took precisely 4 minutes from cold. 2 slices of toast, buttered and cut into strips for dipping, completed the meal. In the 1950s, a can cost about 8 cents and served one generously. For someone eating alone, 1 can was perfect. The soup was sweet, smooth, and warm enough to take the edge off a cold kitchen. Some added a splash of whole milk for creaminess, the way the can suggested. My mother added a pat of butter that melted into a golden swirl on the surface. The toast strips were essential. They turned soup from something you drank into something you ate, giving the hands purpose and the lunch a sense of ceremony. Campbell's understood this. Their advertisements through the 1960s showed solitary grandmothers smiling over steaming bowls. For once, the advertising was not lying. This is a lunch that genuinely makes people feel better. It still does. Number 16. Peanut butter on crackers. When bread had gone stale and the grocery store felt too far, a jar of peanut butter and a sleeve of crackers solved lunch in 2 minutes flat. Open the jar, spread peanut butter on each cracker. Add a thin slice of banana on top, if you had one, or a drizzle of honey, or just eat them plain. The protein in the peanut butter, the carbohydrate in the crackers, and the fat in both combined into something more sustaining than it appeared. A jar of peanut butter cost about 40 cents in the 1960s and lasted weeks. Crackers kept for months in the pantry. This was the store cupboard lunch that never let you down, even when everything else had run out. No cooking, no washing up beyond a plate. For anyone with arthritis in their hands, the twist-off jar and the light crackers were physically manageable in a way that chopping vegetables simply was not. Simple, capable, self-sufficient. That was the whole point. Number 15. Egg in a cup. My grandmother ate this every day of her adult life in Kansas, and I had completely forgotten it existed until 3 years ago. Boil an egg, 3½ minutes for soft-boiled, 4 minutes for medium. Scoop it into a coffee mug, chop it roughly with a butter knife. Add a pat of butter, salt, pepper, and stir it into the toast pieces you have already torn into the mug. The whole thing becomes a warm, buttery, eggy mess that tastes like childhood and takes under 5 minutes from stove to mouth. An egg cost about a penny in the mid-1950s. By the 1970s, even on a fixed income, eggs remained the cheapest protein in the country. Egg in a cup required no egg cup, no toast rack, no performance, just a coffee mug, a spoon, and 5 minutes alone in a kitchen that might feel too quiet, but at least smelled of something good. It is nursery food for grown-ups. There is no shame in that at 74. There was no shame in it at 84 either. Now here is what nobody talks about when it comes to people eating alone. AARP estimates that over 11 million Americans aged 65 and older eat alone every single day. Most of them know how to cook. Most of them cooked for decades. The problem was never the cooking. The problem was the deciding, the getting up, the believing that you are worth the effort of a hot meal in the middle of a quiet day. Every lunch on this list says the same thing. You are worth 5 minutes. That is all it takes. Number 14. Baked beans on toast. A can of pork and beans heated for 4 minutes and poured over a slice of buttered toast. Protein, fibre and carbohydrates on one plate. A can cost about 9 cents in the 1970s. Every retired factory worker, every widowed farmer, every grandmother in a small apartment knew that beans on toast was the lunch you made when making lunch felt like too much effort. And that was precisely why it worked. It asked almost nothing. Some grated cheddar on top. Some added a dash of hot sauce. The purists ate them plain and let the toast go slightly soft underneath, because that, they would tell you, was the best part. Some traditions refused to die because they were always right. Number 13. Canned corned beef hash on crackers. That dented can with the key opener. Corned beef hash spooned cold onto saltine crackers with a smear of yellow mustard was a working lunch that retired into a pensioner's lunch without missing a beat. No heat required, no preparation beyond opening the can and spooning. The salty, dense hash paired with the dry cracker and the sharp kick of mustard created something surprisingly satisfying. A can cost about 20 cents in the early 1960s and served 2 or 3 lunches. Some kept the open can in the refrigerator with a plate over the top, spooning out what they needed each day, portioned by instinct, never by recipe. I have a can in my pantry right now. I've had one there for 50 years. Some things do not need improving. Number 12. Open-face grilled cheese. Proper grilled cheese took 2 pans and 2 people to eat properly, but the open-face version was faster and just as satisfying. Lay slices of cheddar on a piece of bread. Add a few drops of Worcestershire sauce directly onto the cheese. Slide it under the broiler for 2 minutes until bubbling and golden. Pull it out. Eat it. 4 minutes, 1 pan, 1 plate. The sharp tang of the sauce cut through the rich melted cheese, and the bread underneath stayed crisp if you timed it right. Cheddar and Worcestershire were already in the kitchen. Nothing needed buying. Nothing needed planning. This was the lunch that happened when you opened the refrigerator, saw cheese and thought, that will do, and it always did. Number 11. Devilled ham on toast. Long before supermarket sandwich spreads came in plastic containers, Underwood devilled ham in the small white cans with the red devil on the label was the pantry standby. Spread thickly on hot toast, the spiced pork paste melted slightly into the bread, creating something deeply savoury. A can cost about 10 cents in the 1960s and lasted 2 or 3 lunches. The pull ring top was easy to manage. For anyone with stiff fingers, this mattered more than any recipe book ever acknowledged. 2 slices of toast, a can of devilled ham and a cup of coffee. Lunch in 3 minutes. The cans were saved and reused for storing small nails or buttons. Nothing wasted. Not the food, not the tin, not the 5 minutes it took to eat something warm and proper in the middle of a long, quiet day. Here is what these lunches share that modern meal planners completely miss. Not one of them requires you to chop an onion, peel a potato, or stand over a stove for more than 5 minutes. That is not accidental. When you live alone and the house is quiet, the distance between the armchair and the kitchen can feel much longer than it is. These lunches were designed by generations of people who understood that the hardest part of eating alone is not the cooking, it is the deciding, it is the getting up, it is the believing that a hot plate in the middle of the day is worth making. Every lunch on this list was already in the pantry. Nothing needed shopping for, nothing needed planning the night before. That was the genius of it. Number 10. Fried egg sandwich. Heat a pat of butter in a small skillet, crack an egg, fry it until the edges go crispy and the yolk stays runny. Slide it between 2 slices of white bread. Press down gently so the yolk breaks and soaks into the bread. Salt and pepper. Eat it over the sink or at the table, depending on your mood. The whole operation took 4 minutes. An egg, a few cents. 2 slices of bread, a few more cents. A fried egg sandwich was the lunch that cost almost nothing and tasted like someone cared, even if that someone was yourself. The warm yolk running through the bread turned something basic into something genuinely good. This is the meal you make when you realize you have not eaten since breakfast and the afternoon is already half gone. I made one yesterday. It was perfect. It always is. Number 9. Canned spaghetti on toast. Franco-American spaghetti in tomato sauce was the slightly exotic option in my mother's pantry. Heated for 3 minutes and poured over buttered toast, it became a lunch that felt slightly adventurous without requiring any actual adventure. The soft pasta in its sweet orange sauce reminded people of school cafeteria lunches, which was comforting in ways that had nothing to do with nutrition. Some sprinkled grated parmesan on top and flashed it under the broiler for a minute. The cheese browned, and suddenly the can of spaghetti had become something almost impressive. For those of us who remember when spaghetti was considered a special occasion food, eating it alone at your own kitchen table in 1975 felt like quiet luxury. Number 8. Peanut butter on toast with a glass of milk. Not a meal by any modern standard, but for thousands of retired Americans, this was Tuesday lunch, and it was enough. Toast 2 slices of white bread. Spread peanut butter generously while hot, so it melts slightly into the bread. Pour a cold glass of whole milk alongside. The protein from the peanut butter, the fat from both, the carbohydrate from the bread, the calcium from the milk, combined into something that kept you going until supper. A jar of Jif cost about 40 cents in the 1960s and lasted weeks. The ritual of making it was almost more important than the eating. It gave the hands something to do, and the afternoon a starting point. Number 7. Canned soup with a cheese sandwich. Take any can of soup, chicken noodle, vegetable beef, cream of mushroom, whatever was in the pantry. Heat it for 4 minutes. Serve it alongside a thick cheese sandwich on white bread. The soup warmed you from the inside. The sandwich filled the gap that soup alone never quite managed. Together they made a lunch that cost under 50 cents and delivered warmth, protein and comfort without a single complicated step. The smart one stirred a handful of shredded cheddar directly into the cream of mushroom soup as it heated, letting it melt into thick, savoury strings. Cream of mushroom with cheddar stirred through was the Midwestern grandmother's version of a restaurant bisque. Anyone who disagrees has never tried it. Number 6. Toast with bacon drippings. Saved from the Sunday morning bacon in a small jar by the stove, bacon drippings spread on hot toast with a pinch of salt was the lunch that connected my mother to every big Sunday breakfast she had ever cooked for a full table. The toast had to be hot enough to melt the dripping into the bread. The salt had to be just enough. The coffee had to be strong. This lunch cost almost nothing because the drippings were already there, saved the way they had always been saved. My grandmother never threw away bacon drippings in her life. She kept the jar by the stove and used it for everything. For a widow eating alone at the same table where she once fed 6, toast with bacon drippings was memory and meal in one. Number 5. Scrambled eggs on toast. 1 egg, a splash of milk, a pat of butter and 90 seconds of stirring in a small skillet. Piled onto toast, the soft, creamy eggs were the fastest hot protein available. Some added a grind of pepper, some stirred in a spoonful of sour cream if it was in the refrigerator. Others kept it plain, because plain was perfectly fine when you were eating alone and nobody was judging the presentation. Scrambled eggs on toast took 4 minutes. It delivered more nutrition per penny than almost anything else in the kitchen, and it was gentle enough for anyone with stomach trouble, dental problems, or simply a reduced appetite. My doctor told me eggs were good for me. He was right. I have scrambled eggs on toast twice a week. I have for years. I am not embarrassed about it. Notice something about this list. Not one of these lunches requires more than 5 minutes. That is not laziness. That is wisdom. Understanding that the hardest part of eating alone is not the cooking, it is the deciding. It is getting up from the recliner. It is believing that a hot plate in the middle of a quiet afternoon is worth the effort. It always is. You are always worth it. Number 4. Cheese toast with tomato. The simplest upgrade to the simplest lunch. Toast bread. Lay slices of cheddar on top. Add sliced tomato and a crack of pepper. Slide under the broiler until the cheese melts over the tomato and the edges go golden. The tomato softened under the heat, its juice mixing with the melted cheese to create something almost sauce-like. The whole thing took 4 minutes and used 3 ingredients that were always in the kitchen. The tomato added freshness and colour to an otherwise brown and yellow plate. It was a small thing, but small things matter when you are eating alone at a table set for one. Number 3. Bread and warm milk. This is the entry that will divide the comments. A thick slice of white bread, torn into pieces, dropped into a bowl, and covered with warm whole milk. A sprinkle of sugar or a drizzle of honey, eaten with a spoon. It sounds like something you would give a sick child, and that is exactly what it was. But for those of us with sore gums, poor appetite, or simply no energy left to cook some afternoons, bread and warm milk is a meal that goes down easily and keeps body and soul together. The bread softened instantly in the warm milk, turning into something porridge-like and comforting. The sugar gave a small lift. The warmth reached places that cold sandwiches never could. This lunch existed in every decade of the 20th century, across every part of this country. It deserves no shame and no apology. Number 2. Soup from yesterday's vegetables. The last carrots, the half potato, the limp celery stalk Go into a small saucepan with a bouillon cube and enough water to cover. Bring to the boil for 4 minutes. Mash roughly with a fork right in the pan. Season with salt and pepper. Pour into a coffee mug. That is lunch. It costs nothing because the ingredients were already dying in the refrigerator and would have been thrown away by morning. A bouillon cube transformed scraps into something that tasted intentional. This was not a recipe. It was an instinct that every woman who had lived through the Depression carried with her into retirement. Waste nothing. Use everything. Feed yourself even when nobody is counting. The mug mattered. Not a bowl, a mug, because a mug felt like a cup of something, not a meal to be formally sat down for. It could be carried to the recliner, held in both hands, sipped slowly while the afternoon ticked past. This was the lunch that kept thousands of Americans nourished without them ever thinking of it as cooking. Number 1. A cup of coffee and toast with butter and jam. The most eaten lunch in the history of American retirees living alone. Nobody ever wrote it down because it seems too simple to count, but it counts. A pot of coffee, real percolated coffee, the way it used to be made. 2 slices of white bread, toasted and buttered while hot so the butter runs to the edges. A thick spread of strawberry jam or grape jelly, eaten slowly at the kitchen table or in the good chair by the window with the radio on or the neighbourhood outside for company. This lunch costs pennies. It requires nothing but a percolator and a toaster. It delivers warmth, energy, and the small daily ritual that gives structure to afternoons that might otherwise blur into nothing. For my mother, this was not just lunch. It was the anchor of the day. It was the thing that said, yes, I got up. I made myself something. I sat down and I ate it. That matters. When the house is empty and the mornings are long, coffee and toast with jam is not laziness. It is an act of self-care so quiet that nobody notices, and so important that without it the day falls apart. Here is my challenge. If you know someone who lives alone and might skip lunch because it feels like too much bother, send them this video. Not because they need a recipe. They have cooked more meals in their lifetime than most of us ever will. But because sometimes the reminder that a can of soup and a slice of toast is a proper lunch is the only permission someone needs to keep looking after themselves. Try one of these yourself this week. The egg in a cup, the bouillon with toast strips, the open-faced grilled cheese. Then leave a comment and tell me which one your grandma made better. She probably did. She always did. Subscribe. I will be here next week. There is a great deal more to come.